Thank you. Good morning. How are you guys doing this morning? Pretty great so far, huh? And so Andy kind of raised the bar for me today. I'm used to coming up here with the people not knowing who I am, and now he's saying, Laura this and Laura that, so hopefully I can impress you. So thank you for allowing me to be here and talk to you today. I have a few things that I'm going to share with you that I hope you find immediately applicable and practical to your environment. We're not here just to hear good stories. We're here to walk away with something that can go help us make a difference and get it done. So who am I? So I have spent about the last 20 years or so in the PMO and project management space, specifically in a leadership role. Good genes. I have had a consulting practice, but one of the fun things that I did a few years ago, after I spent 12 years on the board of PMI chapters, I still sit on advisory councils for organizations that are looking to transform the way we think about and deliver project management. But I also started a nonprofit called Project Management for Change. What we do is we help provide the power of project management to the nonprofit community. So we use project management to change the world, literally one project at a time. If you're interested, you can find out more about it at pmforchange.org. I also do have a couple of certifications. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is this framework that I use called the Impact Engine. And it's literally based on being in the role that many of you guys are in today and learning the hard way, learning from the mistakes, and figuring out the right ways to get stuff done in an organization without beating our heads up against the wall. So we're going to deep dive into one section of that today, but I'm going to give you a little context of this program. It starts with instilling focus, and everything that's on here is about your mindset. And us as project managers, shifting the way we think about what we do and the power we have as project managers to change the world. There is no other profession that is more trained, more educated, more experienced in delivering impact than project managers. So we need to think a little bit differently about what we do and how we do it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So step one is instilling focus. Now, I'm not going to deep dive into all of these today, but I want you to have a little context as to what we're talking about. So think about it. As project managers, how many times do we say, yes, we can do that, and then we can do that, and then we can do that? As PMO leaders, I can't tell you as a PMO leader how many times I said yes to everything because I wanted to make sure that we were delivering value. And instead, you know, all of us that think we're good multitaskers, are we really? So if we're doing 10 things at once, are we really driving the impact necessary to get to the outcomes that our organization needs? So step one is figuring out how we can instill focus in ourselves, in our project teams, and in the way we do the work that we do so that we can actually get it done with high impact. The next step is measuring outcomes. How many of you heard, of course you guys would never do it, but how many of you heard a project manager describe themselves as successful because the triple constraint was in line? Well, it was on time, it was under budget, and we even gold-plated it, adding more scope. But guess what? Nobody's using it. Were you a success? Your leaders don't think so. Your leaders aren't defining you as successful because you delivered something according to EVM performance metrics. So we've got to think a little bit differently about how we measure our success and focus most deliberately on outcomes and return on investment as opposed to performance and progress. And of course you need to know how you're doing, but you just can't stop there. The next step is performing relentlessly. That means we don't spend 75% of our time on templates and checking boxes and process. We go get it done. I have never heard of a sponsor or a business leader coming to any project manager saying, hold on, you don't have enough templates for me to fill out. Come back when you've got more. Does that ever happen? What they care about is the results. They care about those outcomes. And you and your team need to be thinking about how you can drive that impact every single day. Adapt to thrive. I am so sick of hearing about project management survival skills. We are not in the middle of a war, although it feels like it. We are not in the middle of a jungle. We're sitting in a cubicle or an office. We should not be so focused on surviving and look at ways that we can actually thrive. If we're doing these things, we can thrive. But you know what we have to do? We have to focus on how to be, yes, I know, little a, not big A, agile. We have to focus on figuring out how we can iterate, how we can adapt when changes come our way. If you spend years building out this really big project or putting in all this process, and then the organization shifts directions, you can't keep up. And this is where we'll dig in today. Communicate with purpose. Any of you heard that communication is one of the biggest success factors in determining if your project is going to be successful? So if we know that, why do we still have, 50-50 chance of our project being successful? Even by triple constraint criteria, much less ROI, return on investment. So we're going to talk a little bit about some techniques that you can use to help you communicate with purpose, tell them what they need to know, and then stop. Just zip it. And finally, transform mindset. So the last component to this framework that I use is calling transform mindset. And it's not yet about transforming the mindset of others until we look differently upon our role and the role we should be playing as a strategy navigator in the organization, not just an implementer. Okay, so we're going to deep dive into communications with purpose today. But first I'm going to tell you a little story. And if this resonates with you, feel free to nod, raise your hand, or laugh hysterically. So it's Friday afternoon, and you as a project manager or a PMO leader, portfolio manager, you've gone into a status meeting. This meeting's been rescheduled time after time after time. So now it was supposed to happen at 8 a.m., but the people you needed for the meeting weren't available, so it went later in the day, and it went later in the day. And your sole purpose for this meeting is to get a decision made, or your project can't move forward. Sound familiar yet? Here's how everybody is looking, in the room with you, because it's Friday afternoon. They have other places they would rather be. And your sponsor, who has to make this decision, is stuck on the bottom of page 4 of the status report that you put in front of them in the lower right corner, and they are just so focused on this piece of data you gave them. And you cannot get them to refocus and come back to where you need. You need a decision made, your project is going to be on hold, and this is the look on your face. Are you kidding me? Are you serious right now? You are so frustrated with your sponsor. Remember, half the team's asleep. They're like, why am I even here in the first place? We are not going to get this decision made. And everyone starts looking at each other, right? Whose fault is this? Everyone starts blaming other people. Whose fault is this that we're in this position? Why are we even doing this? We're not going to get the decision we need made. Meeting's over. The sponsor said, I'm sorry, I got to go. I've got to go pick up my kids. I'm out. And you didn't even get close to getting that decision made. Now you're there on Friday afternoon, also having somewhere else you'd rather be, trying to figure out how in the world are you going to get your project moving forward. Your team's upset. Well, what are we going to do on Monday? I have no idea how we're going to keep moving. Anyone ever experience anything like this? Of course not. You guys are all communicating with purpose. This is how we feel when we see some of those status reports put in front of us. This is how we feel when we're trying to get the information gathered up from everybody to get that status report that took you an entire week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get put together to get in front of that sponsor. Imagine the man-hours. We are drowning in paper, digital or actual paper, trees. We are drowning in all of this information and data. But wait a minute, we're supposed to communicate. We're supposed to have analytics. Of course. But we don't need to bury ourselves in it. And if you think you guys have it tough with the projects you're managing, this is the typical sponsor. Because they're not only a sponsor on your project, but they have, a team they have to manage. They have other projects that they're responsible for. So you think it's bad enough for you on your 1 or 2 or 10 projects? Well, they've got decisions they've got to make all day long, and they're being buried in information, which is actually preventing them from making good decisions. So, who is actually responsible for this? Who put that report in front of them in the first place? We did. We do this to ourselves, and we don't even realize it, and it's all good intentions. So what happened was, we started with something simple, hopefully, and then we had to add another thing. And then somebody else wanted to see it in a different way. And so then we had to add more data for them. And then we realized we were in the middle of a meeting and we couldn't answer a question, so now we throw that into the report. And before you know it, it's so long that you can't even get through it. And by the way, no one's actually reading it. They're looking at it for the first time in that room, which is why they're stuck at the bottom of page 4, because they had no idea what that meant. So your sponsors and your decision makers, even with the best intentions, have no clue how to help you. So instead of being strategy navigators, we're being project administrators, running around collecting all of this data and all of this information because we think it's necessary to get a single decision made, when in reality, maybe not. Maybe we can stop with just enough. And if you do, I assure you, everybody will see you as the superhero that you are. The fewer times that you're dragging on to meetings at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, the faster you can get decisions made, the faster you can keep your team moving, because that's your job as a project manager, right? You've got to keep your team moving and going and performing relentlessly, right? Well, they can't do that if they're constantly buried in gathering data just so that they can report it, just so that nobody's going to read it, just so that we can get stuck in a meeting on Friday. The key is to tell them what they need to know to make educated and informed decisions, and then stop. Just stop. Err on the side of a little bit less than a ton more. And why is that? Why is that many of us that have been doing this for a long time, we used to get through a lot more information. We used to have I've heard stories of reports like this thick. I have no idea who was ever reading them, but we can't get through a single page these days. And why is that? Because we're all pretty darn busy. All of us are. Our management is pretty darn busy. The higher up you get in the food chain, and I experienced this as an executive as I made my way up in the food chain running PMOs for bigger and bigger organizations, the higher up I went, the more I had to rely on pretty colors and succinct bullets to get things done. And it's not that our IQ drops the higher up we go in the food chain. It's that we have to make 100 of these decisions in a single day. And we just can't process it all if we are having to read volumes of data and information and figure out what that data is telling us. That's the real challenge. A lot of times we'll throw information in front of our leaders or our teams and the so what is never answered. And I would often say that to my teams, so what? And you have to, and then force the issue. Well, if your leaders are in the position where they're having to pull that out of you, you're wasting time. You are also really busy. You are working with teams that now have the attention span of a gnat. With technology being the way it is, we can't get anyone to read an email, much less a one-page report, right? And sometimes, all right, I have to admit, sometimes it's our own fault. We start off with good intentions in that email, then we end up writing 45 paragraphs to explain everything, and then we copy everybody we know on it, and nobody has any clue what to do with that. Nobody reads those emails, I promise you. So what do? So we want to think about a framework of how we think about communication, and then I'm going to show you a very, very simple and straightforward tool that you can use, and actually I'll show you how to get access to it immediately right after this presentation if you'd like access to all the templates and training I have that goes with this. So hang on for that. First things first, we need to start with some very basic questions. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And this seems so obvious, but I assure you there'll be some things that you learn here that remind you, that refresh your thinking on how we should be talking about our projects. Who? One of the biggest challenges that I see when I go in and help business leaders and executives and CEOs is this trouble they have with accountability. Every organization I've gone into in the last 5 years, one of the first things they tell me is, we need help with accountability. And I look at things like how they communicate their projects. You can't find a name on anything. Well, hello. So when we're talking about our projects, and we're talking about the deliverables, and we're talking about the risks and the issues, and we'll go through an example of this, we need to be talking about who. Who owns it, who's responsible for it, who's working on it. Very, very simple, but just putting a name on something can make a huge difference. And it's not just putting the name on it for them, right? Have any of you ever heard that project managers have no business defining the project or building the work breakdown structure? Status reports are the same way. We are facilitators of the information. We don't build everything ourselves. So when we're looking for ownership, we don't assign it, we get them to take responsibility for it. When there's an issue that comes up, we ask the question and we get them to raise their hand and put their name on it. You don't actually have somebody taking responsibility for something if you assign them to it and just send it to them. It's just a shift in the way we think and talk about it. What? What work is happening? What deliverables are we creating? When? We often spend a lot of time talking about actuals, forgetting about expecteds, or never let our expecteds catch up with our actuals. So what I mean by that is, what do we anticipate that's going to happen, and what has actually occurred? Both of those data points are extremely important when you're communicating your project progress and the outcomes you're trying to reach. Again, we'll go into an example in a minute. Where? This is one of the most important components. Where do I need help? Where are there problems? Where is our energy focused? Why? Why is the so what? Why what we're doing is important? Why we're focusing our energy there? Why we're off track? Why we're back on track? And then how? How we're going to go about getting it done. Now, it sounds impossible to put all of this into a single one sheet of paper or a single way for people to see the information that we need to get them to make decisions, but it's not. We've become too verbose. We feel like we need to tell an entire story when a sentence or two will do. So I'm going to show you a very, very simple example, and I intentionally use something doesn't have a lot of charts on it. It doesn't have a lot of fancy tools behind it, because everyone in this room should be able to use a very straightforward and simple one-pager to communicate everything that is absolutely necessary on your project in order to drive educated and informed decisions and get it done. Because that's what we're really trying to do. And I know it's going to be hard for you to see a lot of the details on this, so I'm going to walk it through with you, but again, also, you will have the opportunity to get access to this stuff for free right after the presentation if you'd like digital copies. Okay, so where do we start? Now again, this isn't about the report as much as it is about the way we do the communicating that we're doing. So, when you guys do a status report, how many of you do that report you do it on Monday morning when you get to work and it's due about a half an hour later? That's, yes, one kind soul in the back admits to it. And half of us are saying, yeah, that's me. Or we are scrambling and pulling data together, and the people that were supposed to provide it didn't quite get it to us, so sadly we've missed our deadline, and now we're trying to get that report in a little bit after the deadline, and hopefully nobody will notice. So what ends up happening is that we spend a lot of time working on, we spend more time than is necessary scrambling at the last minute, as opposed to finding ways to make this reporting work for us, not just in the moment after we've submitted it, but all the time. So here's a few things you can do. First, make it a living document. Meaning, if you only have one page, and you want to keep your head straight, especially if you're managing multiple projects, on what the most salient points are that you need to remember to communicate, jot a note in there as soon as something significant has happened. And then that way, when your sponsor comes to you 5 minutes, they're flying by your office or your cube, 5 minutes before they have to be in a meeting and say, what's going on with this project? I need to go into a meeting to get us more budget. Are you kidding me? Oh, here you go. So it seems silly, but if you have a 14-page status report, you can't possibly do that. If you have one with a few bullets on it, that's not so hard, right? And then your sponsor can use that as their walking around paper. And we'll talk about how they'll use that if you give them to this as a tool. Another technique, and again, some of these things are so basic, but we don't take the time to make it matter and to do this. Do your reporting when the information is fresh. And if you don't make it a living document, at the very least, do yourself a favor and do it before you go home on Friday. Because by Monday morning, you have no clue what happened last week. If your life is as busy as mine, I have so many other things in my head by Monday morning, I have no idea what happened. So it'll help you keep straight, but then also help you make sure that the most important things get remembered. So this is always a fun topic. The colors that we use and what they mean. And first, of course, no matter what organization you're in, nobody seems to have the same definition. So I use what's called brag. Anyone have any idea what a lot of you probably know what the R-A-G, anyone have any idea what the B stands for? Blue, blank, oh, I like that, yes. Okay, so it can be whatever colors you want it to be. But here's the point. I start with blank, meaning there's no color. Any of you get pressured to put green on your projects from the very day that they start? And you haven't even scoped it out? You don't even have your charter done, and you're being told to communicate that everything's on track. On track against what? What is it that we're trying to track against when we have colors? Right, a baseline, milestones, a plan. We haven't even gotten to planning yet, but we're supposed to say that it's green. And we start setting these expectations with people that everything's all hunky-dory, everything's going great. And then what happens? We've set expectations here, we finally get that schedule done, and we go from green to red overnight. Ever happen? So this does take a little bit of training, counseling, emotional support, but we cannot allow there to be colors on the project before we've even figured out what the heck we're doing. Because we're setting expectations that set us up for failure from the minute we start. So a recommendation is to use another color, or in my case, I use blank. I refuse to put colors on this until I have something to measure against. And that's what we need to explain to everyone. I don't know what I'm measuring. And people say, but work's happening. Fine, have a separate set of statuses that cover your progress towards getting to a baseline. But differentiate it, make it clear that there's a difference there between outcomes on the project and the first building the charter. Another thing that I like to do is use black. Anyone have one of those projects where the stakeholders use it's just? It's just one more scope item. It's just one more thing we need to, oh, but we really, really, really need this. Just one more. And then the justs add up, and we have another, and we have another, and we have another, and the next thing you know, your budget's blown. Even your triple constraint is considered not successful, and it was all because we didn't stick to the scope that had been agreed upon and intended, and now we're red. So a project that was doing great is now red because we didn't stop the work. So I like to use another way to communicate, another color, black, to say, enough, we're done. No more. Sorry, bye-bye, we're closed. We can do a phase 2, but that's a new project. So whatever colors you choose, just make sure that you're educating people about how the project flows and what information they're going to see when. So we have red, we have amber, we have green. Every organization defines these slightly differently. Every person defines them slightly differently. In some organizations, red means you're fired. In other organizations, red means what it should, I need attention here and now. Whatever colors you choose, I highly recommend that you get everybody on the same page from day one as to what they mean. And you can, hold back the tears, but it's going to take you a couple hours in a meeting to get them to all agree, but it will be worth 100 headaches through the life cycle of that project. And it's very simple. And then find a place to put that on a key inside your dashboard so people always have that to refer back to. Yellow should be, I need your attention. Red should be, right now. Immediately, give me your attention. And that's what it's for. These are tools that we can use to help get the information we need in front of people so we can get those decisions made and keep moving. Okay, so in this model I have, there's a left and there's a right side of the dashboard. The goal with this left side is for those of us that must absolutely have a lot of sentences instead of data. We've got to have a way to communicate our story. We need to tell our story with words on what's going on. We need to be able to get to the point quickly. You'll notice how small this is. No, you may not use 6-point font. Nobody will be able to read it. The point is to keep it very clear, very direct, just the most important information. You need to be able to tell that story, but then you need to stop. So the first section is a summary. This is where you absolutely must get to the point. Anyone heard of BLUF? Bottom line up front? Think about that always, because this is your opportunity to have a 2 to 3 sentence elevator pitch. Have you ever been caught in an elevator or in the hallway or have the flyby? How's the project going? What's going on? You need to have those sentences prepared, always, and it will change. So this tool is a fantastic way, even if you never showed anyone this report, this is a beautiful way for you to guide you through how you should be talking about your project. 2 to 3 sentences. What's going on? You don't want to repeat content that you're going to then communicate in the rest of the report, but this should be the thing that you have immediately on hand always, not just you, but everyone on the team. Wait a minute, I'm supposed to show this report to other people too? Any of you have to do multiple versions of a status report? The version that you show to leaders that point fingers at other people, the version that you show to your other stakeholders. Why are we spending so much time building all these versions of status reports? If we're honest, we're truthful, and we're fact-based, it's really hard to argue with that. This is not an opportunity for us to, create drama or to point fingers or to explain why things are off track because it's everybody else's fault, not possibly ours. This is about putting facts in front of people so that they can make decisions. I suggest you do this status reporting, you talk about this with your team and do it together. And get everyone on the same page with the truth. The truth may not be pretty, but you know what's worse? Hiding the truth, because it will catch up to you. So this is one of the most crucial places. These next few sections are some of the most crucial places that we get hung up. Ever go into a meeting with your sponsor or one of the business stakeholders and you find yourself making a decision you've already made 3 times? And then there you are again making that same decision and regurgitating all the information you had to get to make that decision in the first place. And now we're going here again and again and again. Now, obviously, you can't have every single decision here. I do highly recommend you have a place where you document decisions, not just risks and issues and scope items that are changing, but actual decisions made on the project so that you don't have to keep making the same decisions over and over again. But the important point is to make sure that we not just talk about the decision we made, but the outcome that we intend to have happen as a result of that decision. This is a big part that we often forget. We talk about the decision. Okay, we decided to move the date, but we don't talk about why or what the impact is to other parts of the project because we have a delay in one place. And that's a very important point that we've got to make sure we're talking about to give the business decision makers context as to what's happening. And we, as project managers and the people that are on the project team, will think, well, we get it, so why don't they? Remember the guy with the hand buried under paper? They cannot possibly remember all of the information that you're showing to them. But I sent you an email, but it was, 25 sentences long, and I couldn't follow it, didn't have time to read it, I don't know what's going on. So we've got to make sure that we're reminding them through any of our communication. Here's the decision we made, why we made it, and the outcome we expect to see as a result. We do not want to use this as a place for finger pointing. Again, consider having, actually, you must have one version of a status report that everyone is working from so everyone's on the same page. You don't want to leave any of these decisions open-ended because that invites the opportunity to talk about them again and to regurgitate the whole process. And you'll be beating your head up against the wall, half your team will be asleep, and guess what's happening when all that's going on? Nothing else. No one's getting anything done. So I know it'll be hard for you guys to see here, but I like to use symbols to help tell the story. So in this case, I'm using a diamond to help people think about a decision needing to be made. You can use a triangle, you can use whatever you want to use, just make sure that it's clear, specific, and only for that section to say, here's where we made a decision. It's amazing how using visual cues can drive people's eyes to the place they need to be and get them focused on what they need to do. You're training them to look for the information that they need to help you. Okay, IRMA, this is one of my favorites. This is your opportunity to manage up. Items requiring management attention. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it help now, please. It doesn't matter as long as you are consistent with using it to manage your leadership. My favorite staff have always been the ones that boss me around. As leaders, we love to be told what to do. Again, don't ever lose that picture of the guy buried in the paperwork. That is every one of your leaders. And it is wonderful when somebody comes to me and says, I need a decision, I need you to take an action, here's what I know, here's what you need to know, here's the decision, here's the pros and cons, done. It's beautiful because I can make a decision right there and then and keep them moving forward. As leaders, we want to help you. I know, sometimes it feels like we don't. Sometimes it feels like we are trying to avoid you. If you have a sponsor that's avoiding you, there are a couple of reasons. They are afraid of your reporting, or they just don't know how. So you need to tell them. I have a whole program called How to Train Your Sponsor. And it's literally about helping them understand the role that they need to play and how you can communicate with them differently to help them help you. Because for the most part, people have good intentions, but they're buried and they just don't know how to help you. So tell them, right? So this is your opportunity to manage up, be smart and focus them. Be very, very direct. Here's the issue, here's the impact, and what I need you to do. It's so simple and straightforward. But you know what we often do? We go just with the issue. There's nothing that will irritate your leadership more than you just bringing a lot of problems to them. We're not whiners, we're strategy navigators. We can go with solutions. We have the ability to drive so much more decision making in the organization than we ever do. You're the one with the knowledge, your team knows what's going on, you can provide the information to make the good decisions. You can guide the strategy delivery the way it needs to go. We have that power, and we turn it over to others instead of finding ways to drive it. My favorite program managers and project managers when I was on the inside building PMOs were the ones that would use what one of them called the Jedi mind trick. He would lead them down the path he needed them to go to get to the decisions he needed them to get to the outcomes. And then at the end of the project, he would tell them, I just pulled the Jedi mind trick on all of you. And they didn't care because the project was a raging success. They just want it to be successful. They want to find a way to help it get to those outcomes. So we've got to help them, right? So we want to make sure that we are prepared with providing supporting detail. You know, you don't provide it in the room, you don't provide the 45 pages, but you have to be prepared to be able to talk to it. And we don't want to expect that our leaders are going to remember it all because they won't. They absolutely won't. And they're not going to read it unless you have it kind of right in front of them. So make sure it's clear and succinct. And here, I use an arrow to draw their attention. Interestingly, it's in the middle of the page, and it's got an arrow pointing to it. And I found, through practical research of putting it in front of people, that their eyes go right to that place. That's where they're going. So activities accomplished, and then the next one is planned activities. Any of you ever been in a status meeting, or in the worst, or on the phone, where somebody goes through a laundry list of everything they accomplished in the entire week? And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I do not need to know this. We just need to have a few highlights. We want to talk about what was done and the impact that we have as a result of that. That's it. That's all we've got to do. And use a little check mark to show that it's done. Your eyes will immediately go to it and know, okay, this is what was accomplished. I'm good. Planned activities, very similar, but this is where we start talking about, again, the highlights, but what we anticipate will happen during that next cycle and the impact it will have. That's what we often forget, is that the impact it will have. Remember, so what, anytime you're doing this reporting. And you don't need to panic if something stays on here a few more weeks than it needs to. At least it shows that you're still moving, you're still focused, you still know what you need to get done. So with any action items, you want to make sure that it's high level, just the top, the big rocks, whatever the most important things are people need to know, and what you're doing and why it matters. And I love to use a box here. It is so fun to put this report in front of sponsors, and then we're in a meeting later in the week, and you see them pull it out and check the box because something happened. People love checking boxes. Make this an interactive tool that people want to use. Okay, so the right hand of the dashboard can be whatever data points are most important for you. Some examples I have here: deliverables and milestones, issues and risks, and budget. But this is where we start measuring things like performance. We talk about impact and outcomes on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, we're talking about the things that show how we're performing, because those are still important data points we need to know. So we want to make sure we're covering and giving that holistic view. This is your place you can use the storytelling as numbers or comparison metrics. So we want to make sure that we're leveraging color to indicate status wherever we can. Remember, colors, arrows, check boxes, check marks, those are the kinds of things that people are going to look for when you're training them to look for where you need their help and where you need those decisions made. So we also want to do things like actually tracking progress. Percent complete is a good one, but there are others. And this is where we need to start thinking differently about how we share the dirty laundry. Expected versus actual. You want that on everything. Everything that matters and everything that you want to improve. If you measure it, you're more likely to manage it more effectively. If you talk about what was expected and that there's a difference between expected and actual, you're more likely to have an intelligent conversation about how do we get here and how do we get back on track. And that's exactly what you can do in 3 or 4 words. You can explain, how do we get off track? What are we doing to get back on track? Why are we where we are? Okay, issues and risks. This is an example of what you can put here on this side. I think it's hugely important because this is a really good opportunity for us to clearly drive that accountability we were talking about. We want to make sure that we have our big rocks here, the big things that can derail your project, the big risks that are coming. And if you do have a big issue that pops up, I hope it started as a risk on this report. It won't always, but we want to make sure that we are drawing their attention to the biggest items. And what will often happen is, you notice how they're across from where that items requiring management attention is, right in the middle? So you can say, see risk or risk, see IRMA. This is where we need to be talking to each other. This is how we say, here's the risk and here's what we need to do about it. And most importantly, make sure that you're putting a name on it. Make sure that you're identifying who the owner is. And remember, what are we going to do? Are we going to tell them that they own it, or are we going to ask them to take responsibility? Who's taking responsibility for this? Who cares about this the most, and who's going to help us make sure that we can get this delivered or resolved? Now, you could use budget or other key metrics. The point here is to leverage the data to tell the story of what's most important. So we can have summary project information here, But the most important thing that we need to do is make sure that it's accurate and current. The mistake we often make when we're communicating data that's relevant to decision making is that our data took so long to put together, and it's so behind it by the time we got the numbers from finance, and by the time we got all the data together, and by the time we got this and that, it's now a month old, and the project's well worse off than it was a month ago. Or maybe not so bad. So the most important thing to remember is whatever data you use, make sure it's something that is accurate and relevant and can help them make decisions. This, I also like to leverage color. You know, in this case, we leverage black and red if it's a finance thing, right? You're in the black or you're in the red. So make sure you're using that to help you tell the story. It's amazing, there's just a little bit of numbers on there, but as soon as you add a little bit of color to it, they know exactly where to look. Again, buried in paper, buried in data, we've got to make sure that as quickly as we can, we get them right to the information they need to make a decision. And again, another opportunity for expecteds versus actuals, current versus expected. This is where your EVM, your earned value metrics do come into play. But again, they're not telling you the story of whether you're actually making the impact. That's what that left-hand side does for you. It lets you focus on the so what and why it matters, and then having all that good data to back it up. So this is merely an example of what you can use to tell that story and to make sure that you're staying very focused on the information they need to make those educated and informed decisions, and then stop. Okay, so this is a little bit about me. I'll show you how you can get information, get all of this information, a user guide, example templates, etc. On the next slide. I do have a membership program, and I also do write a lot. Real stories from the real world, from all the years that I spent in the shoes of many of you inside organizations, and I really didn't have the resources that I needed to be successful internally. It was gathering 50 books here and all of these different resources from all over the place. So I truly do wish I had me when I was you. Therefore, I built programs to support people, all kinds of free content, tons of it, ebooks, templates, tools, resources, so feel free to check that out. And if you do want to stay connected with me, you can certainly find me online. And if you go to my website, impactbylaura.com/dashboard, and give me your email, I will send you access to all of these resources. Or you can text to the phone number 33444 on your phone, and then type in the exec dashboard with no spaces, and you send me your email address, and I will give you all this information.